Last time we left the Cretaceous with a shadow at the top of the ocean. Something soft, with no bones and no shell, that we could barely prove was there. This spring, it surfaced, pulled from the rock of British Columbia. A kraken, 19 meters long, an apex predator that hunted mosasaurs. The largest invertebrate that ever lived. There is just one problem. The whole animal is a handful of fossil beaks. The 19 meters is a number, scaled from those beaks, and rounded up to the most extreme figure the math allows. The octopus is real. The size is a guess. We were wrong about the kraken. Not that it existed. About the one number everyone repeated. The Tethys Codex opens on a question the headlines skipped. How do you weigh a boneless animal from a beak? An octopus is muscle and water. When it dies, it melts. No skeleton, no shell. Nothing but the one hard part in its body, the beak. Almost everything we will ever know about a giant fossil octopus, we read off that one chip of chitin. It is the one clue, and the whole case rests on it. Today, we pull apart two things the headlines fused. What the rock actually proved, and what got added on the way to your feed. The animal is stranger than the monster. It just is not 60 feet of certainty. Before going anywhere prehistoric, start with today. The largest invertebrate alive is the colossal squid. For decades, the only proof it existed was a drawer of hard beaks. They were cut from the stomachs of the sperm whales that ate the squid. A living one was filmed in its own ocean for the first time only a few years ago, and it made news around the world because almost nobody had ever seen one. The biggest soft animals in the sea are the ones we know least. The reason is simple. Soft bodies do not survive. In April 2026, a team at Hokkaido University, led by Yasuhiro Iba, published a study in the journal Science. They had gathered the fossil beaks of a giant Cretaceous octopus. The beaks came from two places on opposite shores of the Pacific. One was the Nanaimo group on Vancouver Island. The other was the Yezo group in Hokkaido, Japan. They named the larger of two species Nanaimoteuthis haggarti. The smaller one they called Gillespie. The find was genuinely big news. The largest invertebrate predator anyone has ever put a name to. And the paper's own title called These Animals Giant Top Predators. That phrase is the scientists, not the tabloids. Hold on to it. It matters later. Here is where the story splits in two. What the team found was about 15 fossil beaks. More later, we will come to that. What the world heard was a 60-foot sea monster that fought mosasaurs. Everything worth understanding sits in the gap between those two sentences. The first honest question is the smallest one. What can a beak, a chip of chitin the size of a fist, actually tell you? Start with what the beaks do prove. It is genuinely strange, and it is the part that got buried. A beak is a feeding tool. The wear on it is a record of a lifetime of meals. And these beaks are wrecked. The big, mature ones are chipped, cracked, and blunted. The 2026 study found that some had lost as much as 1/10 of their length to wear. That is more damage than you see on living octopuses that crush hard shells for a living. This animal was a shell crusher. It was built to break ammonites and armored prey on the seafloor. And the beaks themselves are big. The largest upper jaw, the part they call the hood, measures about 86 millimeters. That is roughly half again the size of the beak of the biggest giant squid alive today. A squid that reaches 12 meters. A large beak is the one solid clue that this was a large animal. The real argument was never whether it was big. It was how big and how much weight a single jaw can carry. The wear is also lopsided. In both species, the right side of the jaw is ground down harder than the left. The team read that the obvious way. This animal favored one side as it fed, over and over, across a whole life, a handedness, 80 million years on. From the scratches on a fossil mouth part, you can tell that a boneless animal was, in effect, right-handed. We are reading its table manners off a broken tooth. Almost none of the coverage led with that. A new way to read behavior off a fossil beak is a quieter headline than a 60-foot monster, and it lost. The beak tells you how this animal ate and which side it chewed on. It does not tell you how big it was. The trouble starts when you try to turn that beak into a body. To do that, you need other bodies to compare against. For octopuses, those barely exist. Soft tissue almost never fossilizes. Octopuses are an old group, more than 100 million years old. Across all of it, there is only a thin scatter of body impressions. They are vanishingly rare. Everything else is we know from beaks. These particular beaks have already fooled us once. 15 of them were dug up and named years back, in 2008 and 2010. They were filed under the wrong branch of the family tree. As relatives of the vampire squid, it took until 2026 for this team to look again and to find more. They took the blocks of rock, the fossils were sealed in and ground them down, one thin slice at a time, photographing each fresh surface. Software stacked those photographs back into 3 dimensions and rebuilt beaks that no one could have chiseled out by hand. 12 new ones came out of the rock that way. Then the team reclassified the whole group as something else. Octopuses, the same fossils, a different animal. We were wrong about what these beaks were, long before we were wrong about how big they got. Even now, with the animal re-identified, the people who study these jaws for a living are careful about the size. Christian Klug is a cephalopod specialist in Zurich. He was not on the team. He called the 60-foot figure quite extreme, and he gave the reason in a handful of words. We have only the jaws. From a jaw alone, the true size of the animal is hard to pin down. 60 feet comes from a ratio. You cannot measure a body that is gone, so you borrow one. The 2026 team measured the beaks of living deep-sea octopuses, the finned, drifting kind like the Dumbo octopus. They worked out how beak size tracks body size in those animals. Then they scaled the fossil to match. It is careful work. It is also a chain of assumptions about an animal 80 million years dead. The whole length rests on one bet that an animal that old was shaped like its living relatives. Maybe it was. Maybe it carried a longer body under the same beak, or a shorter one. From a beak alone, you cannot tell. Run it, and you do not get a number. You get a range. It runs from about 6.5 meters to 18.5. The famous 19 meters is the top of that range, rounded up. The largest the math will allow, not the likeliest. Experts who were not on the team think the real animal sat below that ceiling. No one can say how far below. A measurement comes with error bars. A headline does not. The hunting is where the headlines ran past the science. The scientists did call these octopuses top predators. That is their claim, and a fair one. The tabloids added a specific victim, mosasaurs. The trouble is, this is a finned octopus, kin to slow, bottom-living drifters that are not built to chase anything down. Living finned octopuses sink and drift and feel along the seabed for slow, hard prey. One outside expert, Thomas Clements, doubts this one could have caught a fast marine reptile at all. Crushing shells on the bottom is one story. Running down mosasaurs is another. Only one of them is written on the fossil. Here is the whole chain in order. About 15 beaks, 27 of them. Once the team ground open the rock and scanned what was hidden inside. Those beaks scaled against living finned octopuses. That scaling gives a range. The press took the top of the range. They dropped the bottom. They dropped the error bars. They dropped the word estimate. And they printed a 60-foot monster that hunted mosasaurs. Each of those is a small, reasonable step. Strung together, they manufacture a certainty the fossils never had. The science underneath is real. The single number and the named prey are ours. And what the science actually found is the better story. A giant octopus, genuinely giant, the largest invertebrate predator we know of. Its beak alone outsizes the beak of a living giant squid. The size question is real. It is the false precision that is not. It crushed armored prey on the floor of the Cretaceous Pacific. It favored its right side to do it, the way a person favors a hand. Its beak sat in a drawer for 15 years under the wrong name, until a digital scanner caught what they really were. We can read a handedness and a case of mistaken identity off a few black chips of chitin in gray rock. That is the discovery. None of it needs 60 feet. It is the same bargain we strike with the colossal squid. We know it from beaks in the dark. We size it by inference. We have barely seen it alive. The biggest soft animals in the ocean always reach us this way, in pieces, with the body missing, and a standing temptation to round upward into the gap. This codex is the part that resists the rounding. The Kraken was real. The number was ours. The Kraken's problem was too little fossil, a monster built from a handful of beaks. The next entry in the codex has the opposite problem. A whole animal, preserved in full, nothing missing. And science still got it completely wrong. It is barely longer than your thumb. It came out of rock more than 500 million years old, covered in spikes, with a row of tentacle-like limbs running along its back. When researchers first reconstructed it, they stood it on its spikes, with its limbs waving uselessly in the water, upside down. Then they found they had it the wrong way around as well. The end they had called the head was the tail, a perfect fossil, nothing missing. And we still set it into the world upside down and backwards. How do you get an animal that wrong when the whole body is lying right there in front of you? Tethys Codex.